On the night of December 15th, 1900, a ship fought its way through the stormy North Atlantic. According to the charts, the light of the Flannan Isles lighthouse should have been visible ahead. It was supposed to flash 3 times every 30 seconds, warning ships away from the rocks. But that night, there was nothing. No beam, no signal, only darkness. 11 days later, relief keeper Joseph Moore arrived on the island. He fired signal flares. He sounded the horn, but the only reply was the cry of seabirds. The 3 lighthouse keepers stationed there, James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur, had vanished without a trace. And just like that, one of the most famous maritime mysteries in history had begun. When Moore entered the lighthouse, he did not find signs of violence. What disturbed him more was how normal everything looked. The dishes had been cleaned, the lamps were filled and ready to be lit. Nothing seemed out of place, and yet the men were gone. The clock had stopped. It suggested they had left suddenly, in the middle of an ordinary day. One moment, 3 men were going about their routine. The next, they had simply disappeared. Then Moore noticed something else. Hanging near the entrance was MacArthur's raincoat. That detail would become one of the most haunting parts of the case, because under lighthouse rules, at least one keeper was supposed to remain inside the tower at all times. So if MacArthur had gone outside to help the others, why had he rushed out into a freezing December storm without his coat? Over the years, the story became surrounded by myth. You may have seen the famous diary entry often quoted online. December 12th, storm, MacArthur praying, Marshall crying. It sounds like the beginning of a supernatural horror story, as if the men had seen something impossible out at sea. But there is one problem. That diary entry was never real. It was invented later by writers who wanted to make the story more dramatic. The real records tell a different story, and in many ways, a far more terrifying one. When investigator Robert Muirhead examined the actual logbook, the final entry was calm and routine. Written on the morning of December 15th, it simply said, "Storm ended, sea calm." There was no mention of panic, no mention of madness, no sign of anything supernatural. So whatever killed the men, it did not begin inside the lighthouse. Muirhead then inspected the western side of the island, and what he found changed everything. There were clear signs of enormous wave damage. More than 30 meters above sea level, huge rocks had been displaced. Iron railings had been bent and torn apart. A supply box had been smashed to pieces. This was not the result of fear, or violence, or anything paranormal. It was the work of the sea. The most likely explanation is brutal in its simplicity. At some point on the afternoon of December 15th, Ducat and Marshall were outside near the cliffs, likely checking equipment or storm damage. MacArthur may have still been inside the lighthouse. Then he saw it. A massive wave, or perhaps a series of waves, rising toward the rocks. If he ran outside to warn the others, he may not even have stopped to grab his coat. And if that happened, he never had a chance. A wall of water crashed over the cliffs with enough force to sweep all 3 men into the sea. No bodies were ever recovered. No final message was left behind, and that is how the Flannan Isles mystery was born. Not from ghosts, not from sea monsters, not from some curse hidden inside the tower, but from the sheer violence of nature. Even now, the lighthouse still stands above the cliffs, silent, unmoving, watching the same dark water. And maybe that is what makes this story so unsettling. Not that the men disappeared, but that the most likely answer is also the simplest. The sea took them, and it never gave them back.